Good afternoon and happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather and the tropics continue to stay busy. We cannot just let our guard down, even though Francine is weakening. A new potential system forming next week on the East Coast. I'm going to talk about that and other storms that are affecting those of us here in the Atlantic side, as well as the Pacific side and across the globe. This is not yet formed, but modeling continuing to indicate that low pressure is going to develop slowly here the first part of the weekend and then potentially take on either subtropical or tropical characteristics towards the first portion of next week. We're already seeing rainy weather in some areas here of the coast, so more rain is over time going to be a potential problem, but the other concern could be if something does in fact spin up, that we have to deal with more than just heavy rain, but in fact some stronger wind and coastal flooding and erosion as well. So this is what we're going to be tracking here. The next name on the list would be Helene, as we now have Tropical Storm Gordon over the far eastern, central eastern Atlantic. Here's a look at the globe, and we're going to kind of break things down, starting with Francine and then look at this future system. Then I'm going to take a look at an invest over the islands and Tropical Storm Gordon in the central to eastern portion of the Atlantic. And in the Pacific, we have Tropical Storm Ileana moving towards Cabo San Lucas this afternoon. And we've got Tropical Storm Bebinka and an invest affecting Bangladesh and Far East India as well. Here's a look at the National Hurricane Center official forecast chances for possibility or chances for development over the next 7 days. Gordon is formed now. It is going to stay on the low end, it looks like, as it traverses some cooler water here. It does have a chance to maybe strengthen if the wind shear remains low enough and it gets up into here where waters start to get warmer. Waters are warm across the Caribbean, but wind shear is higher, as 94L will likely struggle to continue to develop, but it has a 20% chance. And then we've got the warm waters of the Gulf Stream, and an approaching trough will allow low pressure to form somewhere in the yellow area over the next 7 days. In this case, I think it'll be over the next 3 days, looking at the beginning of next week. And the remains of Francine still spinning up lots of moisture and a little bit of a severe weather threat across Alabama this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Francine here first before I get to the other systems. Here's the United States. This is the water vapor image. This shows us where larger scale systems are and what the moisture looks like in the middle and upper parts of the atmosphere. This is the remnant low with Francine spinning across Arkansas, western Tennessee, and the Mississippi River region. It is attached to a very big area of moisture spreading across from the Pacific into the southeast. And this moisture kind of wraps around the base of a larger scale trough. There is a bit of a weakness right now forming along a warm front here over the North Carolina coast, bringing some locally heavy rain. Even here where I live in Raleigh, we had a couple of inches of rain this morning, which I think was a little bit under forecast, if we could all be honest. But the rain is certainly welcome. We don't want that every day. But on the tail end of this trough, we're going to be dealing with heavy rain continuing across northern Florida, portions of Georgia, into the Carolinas for the weekend. The Northeast will enjoy great weather. This trough digs down, bringing some stable air, and that is obviously what we like to see. A taste of early fall. I think this is going to really help out for those of you that have plans to look at the foliage in northern New England here in the next couple of weeks. That'll be coming alive here pretty soon. In the west, we do have a big trough as well, which is bringing cooler weather and unsettled weather to portions of the northwest. That's going to draw some tropical moisture out of this storm here, Ileana, into the desert southwest. And let me clear this up here, but as this moisture moves in and this trough pushes further east, I do think next week we could be dealing with some severe weather across portions of the plains and the upper Midwest. But that's a few days away to get too specific. Here's a look at the Gulf of Mexico. Very strong wind shear, strong winds from the west and southwest, bringing rainfall into Florida again. We do have locally some potential flooding across the northern peninsula this afternoon into tonight. But you'll see there's also strong flow out of the northeast, keeping things at bay across the Gulf. So we're not going to reload yet for any kind of tropical activity. Wind shear in both of these directions will keep things at bay over the next week. That could change farther out in time. Here's a remnant circulation of Francine, no longer a wind maker, just a cloud maker and a rain maker. You can see the low pressure here on the eastern side of the Ozarks region, not moving much and will eventually kind of fade. There's more of an upper level feature that takes over at this point. The surface low will go away, but you can see breaks in the cloud cover in here and some higher cloud tops moving into Tennessee and Mississippi and parts of western Alabama. This is where some of the heavier bands of rain could set up here through the afternoon hours. And taking a look at the southeastern side of it, you guys can see the sun back out in Louisiana, but Lots of storm clouds building over Alabama, now western Georgia, northern Florida, and across portions of Tennessee and southwestern Kentucky. And we do have a marginal risk this afternoon and into the evening for severe weather from middle Tennessee down into the Florida Panhandle. Tornado risk is not high, but we could see a couple of quick tornadoes across northern and central Alabama, western Georgia, and middle Tennessee. And the threat for severe wind extends down to the Gulf Coast. This is more so due to the trough that's approaching. There's some dry air aloft mixing in with this tropical moisture, and there's some wind shear, albeit not great. And all these create somewhat of a favorable environment for a few tornadoes and damaging wind gusts. Here's a look at our potential rain over the next several days. Very wet, especially in Alabama, but parts of Georgia as well. We also see moisture building at the coast, and I will get to that in a little bit. But significant amounts of rain, maybe over 5 inches in portions of Alabama. This is a blend of all the models, but you can see between now and Tuesday, potentially more than 4 inches of rain, locally even 5 or 6 over parts of northern and central Alabama. Is everybody going to get this much? No, this is a blend of some models that are super aggressive and some maybe that aren't so much. But you can see, even though Francine is basically gone, the moisture with Francine doesn't just evaporate overnight. It's going to stick around for a while and get stuck, as our upper level pattern does not favor this system getting kicked out. Unfortunately, it gets kind of trapped here and blocked by a large block in place across the northeastern United States. And that is keeping everything stuck in the same places for several more days. So if you are in these areas, obviously flooding is something you need to be taking more seriously in case we do get to that situation. Let's look at the remainder of the tropics. Francine right here, the remains of it, Ileana right here. Right now, pretty good conditions across most of the Caribbean. We've had some flare-ups in the southwest, but nothing showing any organization. That's due to the strong wind flow from the northeast. We do have Invest 92L, which is struggling, moving across the northern Leeward Islands into the Virgin Islands this afternoon. This is Tropical Storm Gordon, which is fighting some wind shear as well, and dry air to the north and west, but it is at least staying somewhat organized. No threat to land at this point. And we've got a tropical wave, which is getting killed off by subsidence and sinking air over the far eastern Atlantic. We'll continue to have waves to watch here, but right now nothing is looking super favorable. As you can see, only one of the last 6 waves has actually had a chance to develop. And a lot of that is due to some cooler water coming down here and a more stable environment and some dry air here that we just can't get mixed out at this point. So the Eastern Atlantic really on the struggle bus this season. I think a lot of us expected it to be busier, but things do change, and we may still be in for a surprise or two. It's too soon to write anything off at this point. So I'm going to talk about what's going on here off the southeast coast and what the setup is like here over the next few frames here. We'll move past the water vapor to show you guys. We may actually be seeing a little bit of a miniature low forming here. This is Wilmington, North Carolina. This is Myrtle Beach over here. You can see there's definitely a spin up here off the coast. Now, it's probably not going to become an invest at this point. It's just focusing an area of heavier rain. There's also just some upward lift here that's bringing this heavy rain through the Raleigh-Durham Triangle region, and some of that's going to spread up into Virginia, but eventually it gets squashed. We've got a lot of different players on the field here. We've got the southwesterly jet. We've got a boundary that's kind of stuck in here, another boundary in here just south of you in Bermuda, but then a bigger scale trough here over parts of the Mississippi River Valley. And that is expected to slowly progress eastward. And as the heights lower here over the western Atlantic, we could see not one, but multiple circulations form, but one that models have definitely been more aggressive with, not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is the area that I think we need to be watching pretty closely. If you look at the wind shear tendency, you will see there is a lot of wind shear across the southern U.S. That's this area of red, a lot across the western Atlantic, but much lower wind shear here where our upper level feature is. In fact, it's tending to less wind shear. You see this decreasing, this dashed line over here. I know my colors are clashing, but if you see this area here where there's low wind shear and a decreasing amount of wind shear, that is projected to move eastward and off the coast here early next week. And when this wind shear relaxes near the Carolinas and in the waters between the Carolinas and Bermuda, there will be an opportunity to see these little pieces of energy start to maybe ventilate a little bit more and grow in size. So as a result, there's certainly some potential for something to form. Now, do all the models agree on this? No, it's still very early in this formative stage, but you can see here the latest GFS model shows a weaker system, which may initially be subtropical because it's linked to a front, but it's possible if it sits over the Gulf Stream here long enough by early next week, it gains enough tropical characteristics. And more importantly, if it does, in fact, do what the GFS says it may do, it will deepen over those warm waters and have a chance to become a tropical storm. We saw this with Ophelia last year, Ophelia, although that was the second half of the month of September, but a very similar setup to that. Regardless, you can see winds are going to pick up here at the coast and rain is going to increase, and the time on it is going to be sometime from the end of Sunday to Monday and maybe even into Tuesday. And this is just one model. Oh, by the way, it does have another area of low pressure forming near Bermuda. When I showed you the ensembles yesterday, for those of you that saw yesterday's video, you saw kind of a split, some going to Bermuda, some going back to the North Carolina coast. And I've been analyzing it a little bit more, and I think personally there's going to be two separate features to track, but the one near the coast is the one, of course, we need to be watching more closely. Over time, this moisture does eventually spread northward. How quickly is still to be determined, but if there is a formed low pressure system, we could see significant rain in places that really could use it. Maryland and West Virginia, Southeast Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, and the western half and northern portion of Virginia. So the Mid-Atlantic region needs some rain, and the GFS certainly is what we might be rooting for if we want to see that. Now, looking at the ICON model, this one takes this low pressure feature. It's struggling with the initial development and actually delays it until the middle of the week, but it does still have low pressure forming and bringing a couple of days of rain here to the Carolinas, Virginia, and the Chesapeake Bay area. It's just a few days behind the GFS. It's weaker as a result, but it does show that low pressure forming as well. So regardless of which model is your favorite, and they may both be wrong, I would not be shocked by that, we are going to see a coastal low forming. It may or may not become tropical. It may or may not have stronger winds with it, but certainly bringing a lot of rain with it. Here's a look at the European, and again, it's kind of more towards the ICON model with that slower development, but it has it Tuesday night and Wednesday near Cape Hatteras, a weaker feature, and as a result, coming a little bit farther north and just kind of stewing around. This is probably the worst case scenario for those of you that want to have a good weekend to go to the beach, because it could linger into Friday and Saturday of next week. But again, it's still a ways off. And finally, I do want to show you we did see the ICON, but I did want to show you the NAM short-term model here. Not a global model, so it picks up on some different features. But you can see all this rain over eastern North Carolina eventually fades this evening, and we just see a few leftover showers. Tomorrow can't be too bad a day. It might be a little damp in South Carolina, and Sunday doesn't look awful, but the NAM model here starts to get a little bit frisky with what's going on off the coast, and in fact develops a fairly mature subtropical storm by Monday afternoon. And the general track of this system looks like it's going to be north, bending back to the northwest, somewhere in this region. Now, this is not the premier tropical model. In fact, this is kind of on the limit of where this model can go, but it is picking up on features aloft that maybe the other global models don't have as good a resolution on. So it's something I would not completely discount. It's just probably not the most likely scenario to see a mature tropical storm forming Monday night off the North Carolina coast. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Rain potential definitely climbs. A lot of this has already fallen today, but take a look at next week, and we do have the potential by the end of the week to see amounts that may exceed 5, 6, even 8 inches for the Outer Banks and for the rest of the North Carolina coastline. Maybe 4 inches around the Hampton Roads region, 2 to 3 near and to the north of Raleigh up to Richmond. Some of you have already had over 2 inches, so this will be additional. And finally, maybe some relief coming up to the Mason-Dixon line and maybe even to New Jersey and to coastal New England by the time we get to the end of this week into the next. So that's what we're looking at. Did want to show you the GFS, looking into the longer range here, because one thing I am a little bit more concerned with behind this system is the fact that this front doesn't just magically disappear. We get stuck with a trough in the east and tropical moisture building, and if wind shear drops off, we may see additional threats coming later in the month of September. Too soon to get too specific on it, but you guys can see we again have at least the framework for something else to maybe pop up in the Caribbean or affect Florida or the southeast coast. The time frame on that would be more than likely late next week into the following, but again, it's still very far off. The ensembles show that as well. You can see here, a big area of high pressure shuts things down across the Caribbean, but this trough is lingering. This is an upper low here, and this trough lingers in here and creates an avenue for pieces of moisture to come up perhaps in this direction. Of course, it could be in this direction or in this direction. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty when you get beyond a few more days, but this piece of energy just lingers across Florida. which means one of two things. One, it means we're going to have a lot of slop and a lot of rain in Florida and the southeast, even if something doesn't form. But two, if wind shear does drop off and this hangs out, we may see another storm system at some point in here. So that's what we'll be watching for you guys. Ensembles show kind of a lot of different possibilities. You can see pressures lowering in the Western Caribbean here around the 23rd, 24th. Nothing in the Eastern Caribbean, but potentially around Cuba, Florida, eastern portions of the Gulf, Northwestern Caribbean. Lots of possibilities for some mischief here on the southeast coast for the week of the 23rd. I'm looking over at my calendar and looking at the European ensemble, you can see as well. It's going to be a wet time here through the rest of the month across Florida, Western Cuba, the Southeast Gulf, Central America. Not so wet across the Northeast Caribbean and pretty dry for the Western Gulf. So Texas and Louisiana, for the time being, you're going to see drier than average weather and hopefully no tropical mischief for the next couple of weeks. All right, let's look beyond into the Atlantic. Invest right here, Tropical Storm Gordon right here. There was another invest down here that's just kind of getting absorbed into this feature here. But overall, outside of Gordon, no real threats to be stressed about. Here's Invest 94L moving across St. Bartholomew, I think it is, Bartholomew maybe, across the northern Leeward Islands, Netherlands, Antilles, and heading into the Virgin Islands later on. Another piece of energy will be hitting you in Guadeloupe and Martinique and some of the other islands here as we get into the afternoon. So we're going to track that for you. No development chance at this point. It said 20%, but I just don't see it happening. Here we have Tropical Storm Gordon in the central Atlantic, no threat to land. You can see a lot of dry air on the western side of the system. See how stable things are here. All of the business is on the eastern side over here. And as a result, it's lopsided and still struggling to develop, but has been classified now as a tropical storm with winds of 40 miles per hour. As that wind shear continues to increase and the dry air surrounds the system, it's going to struggle to develop and strengthen anymore. Maybe towards the middle of next week, it gets into some warmer water and has a chance. I don't think, well, it's possible that this could continue west, but it may die at that point. It could also turn to the right and maybe have a chance of developing more in the long term, but not expecting a strong hurricane at this point, just something that remains over water. Our first fish storm of the whole year. That's just kind of how this year's gone. And here's Tropical Storm Ileana. This is Cabo San Lucas. The system will be moving on shore here late in the afternoon into tonight, bringing lots of rain with it. This will not rapidly intensify. The wind shear's too strong, and it will eventually diminish into a remnant low over the weekend across the Gulf of California. But lots of rain coming up to a foot here on the west coast of Mexico, 8 inches across Baja Sur. And obviously the resorts are going to be dealing with quite a bit of nasty weather. And beyond that, those of you in the Southwest do have to watch what's left of it. We could be dealing with significant rain in the Phoenix and Tucson areas, heavy amounts across the mountains with flash flooding possible. And around the Four Corners region, we could see significant rains coming as well for the first half of next week. And lastly, we have some good news, albeit temporary. Tropical Storm Bebinka actually weakened some, and the forecast has lowered to it being just a marginal typhoon as it comes across Okinawa and then strengthening some. Still expected to hit near Shanghai as a typhoon, but the intensity forecast has dropped significantly from strong typhoon to maybe what we would call a Category 1 typhoon. And here's the reason why. It is making a comeback now. But you could see some pretty strong wind shear from the southeast that was under forecast before. So not all storms rapidly intensify out here, albeit it seems like they do. The wind shear sometimes wins out. It's still kicking, though, and if you are in the northern portions of Okinawa, you're going to get this system here in the next couple of days and beyond. So I appreciate everybody's time today. Hope you guys have a great Friday. I'll catch up with you again here sometime tomorrow. But I appreciate you guys for liking this video, sharing with your friends, becoming a subscriber. And feel free to comment. Let me know how you're doing if you're on the Gulf Coast region. Here we are on day 3 of this around Francine. And hopefully you're getting your power back and able to start cleaning up after the mess that was left behind. As always, I give all the honor, all the glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who drives me every day to become a better man, a better person, and somebody who can serve more folks and obey and be more obedient. And God has been good to me, even when I didn't accept him and when I doubted him. Paul tells the church of Rome, Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And my purpose is very simple. That is to help other folks, whether it be through ministering to them or through sharing weather and getting them prepared for future storms. But as always, you are welcome to request any prayers from me, I'm happy to pray for you. And I welcome people of all beliefs to this channel, no matter what you believe. And I'm sure it may not be what I believe, but you're welcome here. And just know that you are loved and cared for. And I look forward to catching up with you all again here soon. Take care.